is releasing very soon, so that begs the question, how free-to-play friendly is she actually? Let's talk about it. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. I have to say, I am in a rather jolly mood because we are very, very close to Christmas. At least whenever I'm posting this video, it is Christmas Eve tomorrow, and I am very, very excited about that. Goodness, I love Christmas. And I hope that you're also having a very lovely and jolly Christmas season. Now, with that being said, let's talk about the character. So, in terms of her free-to-play friendliness, I am just gonna say it straight up, she is extremely budget-friendly. Extremely budget-friendly. It's one thing to be a strong character, but it's another thing to be a strong character that's going to be good for so many different DPSs in the game, and because she doesn't really need her signature weapon, this means that you can pull for an S0 R0 character that is going to have a ridiculously high impact on your account. The value that is being added by simply pulling 1 gold is ridiculous, and because of this, she is obviously really free-to-play friendly. Now, I will say, it's not really that surprising that her weapon is skippable, because that is generally the case whenever it comes to second slot teammates. You usually don't require their weapon in most cases. There are some exceptions like Yinlin, but that's mostly just because Yinlin's primary value comes from her damage, so whenever you gimp her damage, she loses a lot of her value. But generally speaking, most second slot teammates can go without their weapon, and Lynae is no exception. However, in her case, she has access to Static Mist, which is an excellent supportive weapon that is able to provide attack percent to the incoming resonator. That's excellent. There's also going to be brand new standard weapons, including the new standard pistol, but generally speaking, I believe that she's still mostly going to be using Static Mist because she's a second slot teammate, and her main job is going to be to support, and Static Mist is conducive to set goal. So, with that in mind, not only is she free-to-play friendly in terms of weapon options, but she's able to work with a ton of characters, meaning that whenever you get this unit, you've basically got yourself a unit that is always going to be effective in middle tower, no matter who your main is. I do believe that she's going to be better for some characters than others, but generally speaking, no matter what your account looks like, she is going to be a good pull. Now, okay, if you're somebody that has a full Cardathea team and a full Zoni team, and you use those two in middle tower all the time, then you're one of the rare people that is hardly going to be benefiting from Lynae's release. But for the vast majority of people, they are going to be benefiting from this character, and even if you are a negative status main, it is very rare that somebody has a Wuthering Waves account and they only have 2 fully built teams for all of their endgame modes. You're usually going to have at least 3, so no matter what, there is going to be a situation in which you're going to be able to use this character. Not to mention that she ends up providing you with really good bang for your astrites, because generally, most second slot teammates in Wuthering Waves are designed with a more specific niche in mind. That makes sense, there is only 3 team slots in this game, and generally characters are more tuned to specific types of playstyles. But because Lynae is such a universal unit, she effectively removes the need for you to go out of your way to get more specific units for particular characters. Now, I will say there are some cases where she just isn't gonna be better. For example, I simply don't expect her to be able to replicate what Cantarella is able to provide for Lova. However, I believe that for somebody like DPS Yuno, she's gonna be quite an effective character, meaning that you no longer have to worry about pulling Shikona in order to make DPS Yuno viable. So fine, there is very much going to be circumstances in which she's not going to be the absolute best in slot for certain characters. However, there is still going to be a lot of situations in which she's going to be able to alleviate the need for you to go and get these specific characters that otherwise wouldn't really benefit your overall account that much. And I would say that even in a case like Lova, where you would ideally rather just pull for Cantarella, there is still value in simply just using Lynae instead. Because if you're a free-to-play, perhaps you're not going to want to invest in such a specific premium team, which is completely fair. It's part of what makes negative status characters so un-free-to-play friendly. You have to invest in such a specific way, and if you don't adhere to the rules of a negative status team and pull the best applicant, then you are left with a far worse feeling DPS that is a lot weaker than what their maximum potential is able to provide. So even for characters where she's not necessarily the best in slot, she's still going to be more worth using than the budget options, as she's such a universal buffer. She's obviously not going to be as good for every single character individually, but she is generally going to be fantastic for most of the cast, and this inherently makes her ridiculously free-to-play friendly. It's one thing to be versatile, but it's another thing to be a strong versatile character, not to mention that she is a versatile second slot teammate. For instance, think about Shorekeeper. that character has been meta ever since her release, and even though we're getting more and more specific third slot teammates, I would argue that Shorekeeper's pull value hasn't really depreciated all that much, because while there are alternatives for teams that are a lot more specific, for somebody that's a free-to-play or somebody that has more limited astrite resources, they're not going to want to invest into every single specific third slot teammate. Not to mention that most of the time, they don't end up being that much better than Shorekeeper in the first place, because not only are the computer lady's own buffs just that good, but they usually don't end up offering enough to be worth getting over Shorekeeper. Now, there are some exceptions. Choyuwen is an actual substantial upscale for Ferlova, for instance, but before him it was Roshia, who just wasn't really all that much better in Shorekeeper within Ferlova's team. It did mean that if you pulled for Roshia before, you finally had a place to use her, but generally, Shorekeeper was still a perfectly fine replacement. And in Cardathea teams, Chisa is an upscale, but not really by a significant enough margin to justify the amount of limited pulls it takes to get Chisa, and she only really hits the ground running if you're able to get her signature weapon. So, with that in mind, Shorekeeper has still retained her status as being one of the best units in the game, if not the best unit in the game, and I think that for the foreseeable future, this isn't really going to change. Crit buffs are just that universal. What they made with Shorekeeper is a character that is basically always going to be useful no matter the situation, and I believe with Lynae, we are seeing something similar but with a second slot teammate. So with that, we now have a really versatile second slot and third slot that you're basically able to put in almost any team in the game, barring negative status. Well, in Shorekeeper's case, you very much can put her in negative status teams because she doesn't interfere with how those teams work. However, in Lynae's case, you're not going to be putting her as a second slot in, say, a Zani team, for example. You're just going to want Phoebe there. But either way, the point stands that these two are very versatile, and because we've seen how good Shorekeeper is and how much staying power she's had in the meta, with how free-to-play friendly she's been for such a long time, I believe that Lynae is going to be the exact same case, just with a different slot in. I genuinely believe that she is going to be one of the best characters in the game for quite a long time, and I cannot recommend her enough. So she obviously ends up being a very, very, very free-to-play friendly character, simply by virtue of the fact that she is able to work with basically anyone on your account, meaning that no matter what, she is going to be helping your vigor management, she is going to be effective for so many different DPSs, and she alleviates the need to get more specific characters on your account. That is going to save you a lot of astrites in the long run, and consider this. This is just the start of her value. She's really good right now, but because of Toon Break, and the fact that we don't have a Toon Break specific DPS yet, the situation is only going to get better whenever we get more characters that are able to capitalize on her specifically. So yes, there is no doubt about it, this is a very free-to-play friendly character, and I would say that she is worth it for basically any type of player, and the reason why I'm really pushing this and really emphasizing this is because she is just that good. If you've been playing this game long enough and you were around for Shorekeeper's release, and you perhaps skipped Shorekeeper, I am 99% sure that unless you just personally don't like the character, you probably did try and get her on a rerun, because the game just feels a lot better to play when you have Shorekeeper, because she is such a handy and versatile unit that once again is able to save you a bunch of astrites, pulling specific teammates for specific team composition. So, with that in mind, I would say that if you're a free-to-play, definitely try and get at least one copy of her. I will add, your account isn't suddenly bricked if you're not able to get her. Don't worry, your game isn't over, your account isn't cooked, it's not the end of the world. However, she is very easy to recommend, because that's the thing, your account isn't suddenly worse, because if you do already have complete premium teams and you don't really feel the need for her, she is gonna be skippable. However, there's gonna be a lot of units where she's straight up just going to be an upgrade over the previous second slot teammate, so there are going to be circumstances in which you're going to want to get her. But don't worry, it's not completely fried if you're not able to get her. But I will say that generally, I do think that you really should try to pull for her. She is kind of goated. Really, really, really good second slot teammate. And definitely free-to-play friendly. There is no question about it. It would be one thing if she was this versatile, but needed her signature weapon, for example. I would still say that she is a really budget-friendly option in that case, because sure, she would need her sig, but at least she would be really good for so many different characters in this game, which would add a lot to your value, and even be best in slot for some of them. However, the fact that she doesn't even need her signature weapon, and you can use Static Mist on her, because that's another thing. It's not even that she doesn't just need her signature, but she also has access to a good standard weapon, if not currently the best standard weapon in the game. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see if that changes. once we've been able to test out the new standard weapons. However, generally, as of now, Static Mist is agreed upon to be the best standard weapon in terms of pull value. It is a fantastic alternative for her, and you generally just don't need to invest all that much in order to make this character good for your account, and you don't even need to have specific characters in general to make this unit work. She is amazing. This is a lot of glaze, but it is very justified glaze of how strong this character is. And yeah, I really can't say anything other than she is very, very free-to-play friendly, and I think that she is going to be shorekeeper levels of free-to-play friendly going forward. Hopefully this video was able to tell you whether Lynae is free-to-play friendly or not. This has been Juice, signing out, and I honestly never thought Kuro Games was gonna make a character this broken universally.